Welcome to this episode of Health Reversion. You're here with Adrian, and in this episode, we're going to be looking at 5 main truths around gluten and whether it is your friend or your foe. Do you stay away from gluten? Do you include it in your diet? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd be really interested to hear. So the first fact is that gluten is a FODMAP. Wheat together with barley and rye contain high levels of fructans that are a type of FODMAP. FODMAPs are a group of sugars that are not completely digested and absorbed in our intestines. They have a tendency to attract water and can ferment in our large intestine, which can result in some unpleasant symptoms. So if you do have a friend, or if it is yourself, who when they do consume wheat products, rye, barley, and there is some digestive discomfort later on, then this could be the potential cause. Number 2, wheat has been hybridized and extensively genetically modified since the 1960s. The modern wheat used in most countries around the globe is actually a hybrid of the original einkorn wheat. It has been engineered to grow to a shorter height and create a larger head. So the original einkorn wheat grows taller and it has a smaller head. So these genetic modifications have been, you guessed it, primarily to do with greater yields and getting more out of the crop. We've got a global population that we need to feed, so some people got busy and they changed the structure of wheat to their liking. Perfectly reasonable justification, but did they give any thought to what impact this altered version of wheat, and therefore the proteins inside being gluten, has on the human body? Is it safe? Can it be digested by you and I? The third point is some questionable practices that happen around harvest time. In some countries, and these are reputable countries, a substance called glyphosate, or Roundup, is sprayed on the crop several days before the planned harvest. And the idea here is to kill the wheat, to make the harvest slightly earlier, easier, and yield a larger quantity. Now, if I was a farmer and someone came along and said to me, hey, do you want it easier? I'd be like, of course I do, I work hard. Do you want a higher yield? Yeah, that'd be wonderful, great. And do you want a slightly earlier harvest so you can, get onto other things that you need to do? So be like, yes, I check all those boxes, thank you. So hence, many farmers and many countries adopted this practice, but a chemical that instantly kills living things that it comes into contact with being sprayed all over our food prior to harvest, does it dissipate after that? Does it break down on its own? Is it not a threat to us? Or could it be? The next point is on the actual protein of gluten. Gluten is actually made up of 2 proteins, gliadin and glutenin. It's very rare. It doesn't happen with any other of the amino acids and proteins out there. There is research that suggests that nobody on this planet can actually fully digest gluten. And we're not just talking about celiac disease or gluten intolerance, which for celiac disease, apparently it only affects several % of the population, but that could be much higher. And gluten intolerance, well, again, that's hushed down as well, and it's maybe 5 or 10% out there, but that could be much higher as well. But potentially all of us can't actually fully digest gluten. So if we're having it in small amounts, then maybe it's not posing an issue. But if it's a staple part of our diet, then this could be an issue. The reason that this could be an issue is because these undigested particles travel down to the intestines, where the body may perceive them as an invader or a threat and begin the inflammation process to try and counter that threat. So as I said before, if wheat is a staple part of your diet, if you're into your croissants and you've got your bread and your biscuits and your pasta, then potentially you're putting your body in a state of low grade or chronic inflammation, which is then the final fifth point. With the body turning on an immune response and creating inflammation, which is a perfectly natural process for the body to do under general circumstances, but for it to be turning on an immune response in relation to food, and given that we eat every day, and again, if wheat is a staple part of the diet, then this potentially is going to lead to long-term health problems as the body is constantly attacking itself. And this is where the more serious conditions such as celiac disease stem from. So that's the 5 points covered there. There is an extra bonus point, if you will, but I need to do more research before I talk about this because it's quite serious. But there has been some studies and research done that links Alzheimer's and schizophrenia and other mental health conditions to the consumption of gluten. A book to potentially look into this further is called Grain Brain, and I'll let you do your own research on that one. So in conclusion, there are some favourable characteristics to wheat. It's very easy for bakers to turn out large amounts of loaves. You've got that gluttonous sort of sticky property to the dough. It's higher in calories than many of its peers, including rice and amaranth, etc. And I guess it tastes really good, doesn't it? The donuts, the biscuits, etc. So you'll have to end up deciding in the end whether the cons that I discussed at the beginning of the video outweigh the pros that I've just discussed there. So some suggestions going forward. As hard as it is, and it's almost like getting off certain medication and certain drugs that are out there, but if you can actually give, or someone that you know that's struggling with health problems, actually do away with gluten for an extended period. So we're looking at several weeks, if possible, and even several months. And just seeing what effect that has on the body. If it doesn't make any difference, then it's great, you can go back to eating gluten. But if it does make a difference, and potentially digestive-wise, or with joint pain, inflammation in general, maybe the blood markers when you see your doctor have improved, it might be something to keep out of the diet. But if you're like most people, and including myself, and you really love the bread, then at least consider organic sourdough bread. Through the sourdough process, the bread is fermented and cultured, and that process breaks down the protein. So as we discussed before, gluten is made up of 2 proteins. So through the fermentation process, it breaks those proteins down to a more easily digestible format. And if we go organic, then we're going to be avoiding the spraying of the glyphosate or the Roundup. And last, just make sure that when you are sourcing that sourdough bread, that you're getting it from a good, reputable baker who hasn't taken any shortcuts. Some of the commercial sourdoughs, they'll do the fermentation for a shorter period, then they'll add yeast back in, and then they'll get the rest of the loaf to rise from there. So ensure that it has gone through the full fermentation process and there's been no shortcuts or funny business taking place to produce that final product. Thank you for listening to the end of this video. If you didn't get anything out of this video, please give me that feedback and give it a thumbs down. If you did get something out of this video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. In the meantime, keep well, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.